So I'm going to show you guys how to properly alter images from the raw format. When you take a picture in a digital camera, it stores a raw image. And this image may look okay as it is, but there's a lot of things you can do to make it look better and more realistic than just the straight capture. So this is Lightroom. This is what I use for developing photos all the time. And this photo of our baseball player here is our subject, and it looks overall just a little bit dark. So over here in this corner is our develop module, and we can start with some of these tools up here. This is a cropping tool, and you can kind of zoom in a little bit, bring the edges in so that our focus is even more on the central figure there. And then these are the different toggles that you can move to adjust your image. So starting at the top is a color temperature, and if you slide it to the right, it makes the image warmer, kind of like a really hot sunny day. Or to the left, it's bluer, like if there was a cloud that went over or a rainstorm. Normally you want to keep it kind of right about in the middle. You can warm it up a little bit. Sometimes it helps to add a little warmth to skin tones. And then I was going to ask you if you see anything else of these sliders that remind you of anything that you might have learned in art class. Like, have you guys learned anything about the elements of art or the principles of design?
No, not really.
Really? Okay. Well, see, these are some of the elements of art, things that make up artworks, things that you can judge artworks by, and the principles of design. Do any of these look like any of the sliders that you have up here?
Well, texture?
Texture actually is one of them that's a little bit later on.
Yeah.
There's a way to do that. Do you guys see
Contrast.
this
Yeah.
contrast? So photography is one of those kind of unique, it's a way of, you have specific control over one of the elements or principles of design here, where in other art forms like ceramics, your contrast, you really have to work at it with different glazes or something like that. With paint, you have to apply paints. This is actually a very specific slider that you can use to see there's very contrast where your blacks go really black and your whites go really white. If you slide it the other way, it makes it really flat. So anyway, photography is something where you can actually have mathematical control over some of your principles. But first, the first thing that I would like you guys to look at is exposure, and see how it looks just a little bit dark. So if you bring this up a little bit, see how the whites pop a little bit more, and overall even your midtones pop a little bit better. So if you look at it before and after, you can use the undo tool. See, it was kind of dark before, and then with the adjustment, it just makes it look a little bit brighter. Does that look better? Okay. So these are some other contrast toggles here where you can adjust your specific highlights. Like if your highlights were really bright and you were losing detail in your highlights, you can bring those down. If you're losing detail in your shadows, you could even bring those up a little bit. And then these down here relate to color and contrast as well. Clarity is kind of an edge control. If you add clarity, you might notice the detail in like the grass where there's a lot of contrast from light to dark is even more pronounced. And vibrance and saturation do very similar things. They basically just increase the strength of the color coming through. Down here further, you can do sharpening. So we'll zoom in. Do you have a question, Ray?
I like the aqua color.
Oh, so yeah, this is an area where you can actually, yeah, that's your favorite color, right? You could strengthen a specific color. So there aren't really any aquas in this scene, but what colors do you see in this scene?
I
Blue.
see, yeah,
Blue? Okay. Oh, bless you. So if we wanted to, we could really saturate the blues. See how, like in the pants, they just go crazy saturated. So there are ways to make it look unrealistic, but there are uses for this where if you wanted just to bump a little bit of color to emphasize it, you have that ability. So clicking on it, you can zoom in.
Oh, can we
We're
see
all
the
allergic.
red?
You want to see red on that?
Yeah.
See your hat?
Wow.
The hat goes from, and then if you desaturate it, look, it goes to gray.
Yeah,
That's
it's grayish red.
Wait, do the full again and look at the arm.
can give them a sunburn.
Oh, no, it's like a body cut on you.
Okay, let's get back on track here. So now that we've zoomed into 100%, we can check our sharpness. And if it isn't sharp enough, usually what you can do is you can use some of these presets to add a little bit of sharpening, or you can actually go over here and use a slider and really get it super sharp. See how? So I'll put it back to 0 so you can see the difference. See how it's a little bit fuzzy there, like if you're not wearing your glasses. And then if you add the sharpening, it really defines the edges.
It's like a little fuzzy.
So let's zoom back out. Now that we've done most of this, there's one other thing that I like to enable is this profile corrections, and that adjusts any kind of lens abnormalities that you're using. So you can see turning it on and off. It's not a big change here. But that takes you through kind of the basics of getting a file ready to print. And it's here, we can reset it back to what it was originally. See how it's kind of dark?
Yeah,
and,
really dark.
and then
It's kind of like the baseball.
yeah, and this is where we ended up at, which is a much better looking image.
Yeah, because it was a little dark right there before.
Yeah. So what I'll let you do is I'll let you guys play with the sliders, and don't worry, you can't mess anything up, and you can see what these specific things do, and then you'll have a better idea of how to use this when you start working on your own images.